The quiet moments of self-reflection often reveal truths we have avoided for years, and it is exactly in this silent space that the journey to healing invisible beliefs begins to take shape. When someone feels disconnected from love or repeatedly attracts relationships that mirror old wounds, it isn't a sign of failure. It is a sign of unconscious programming speaking louder than conscious desire. Dr. Joe Dispenza often reminds us that the subconscious mind governs most of our choices long before we are aware of them, shaping not only how we love, but what we believe we deserve. And when these programs run unchecked, they create emotional patterns that feel like destiny, but are in fact loops that can be transformed. In this video, we're going to explore how these hidden beliefs form, why they hold so much power over your relationships, and what it truly takes to shift them at a level deep enough to manifest a life that aligns with your essence. This isn't about forcing change or intending to be positive. It's about understanding the subtle ways your body remembers stories of abandonment, rejection, silence, or emotional scarcity, and how those stories filter the love you allow in. You'll be invited to examine the emotional roots behind your patterns, to question the narratives you carry, and to step into a space where healing becomes an intentional, embodied practice. Because when your internal landscape changes, the external world inevitably follows, and the love that once felt distant begins to move toward you naturally, not as an achievement, but as a consequence of your new state of being. The invisible architecture of emotional beliefs. There is a particular kind of silence that lives beneath every repeated disappointment, an echo that lingers long after a relationship ends or a hope collapses. It is not the silence of loneliness itself, but the silence of a belief shaped long before adulthood, a belief that operates beneath awareness, yet determines what we allow ourselves to feel, receive, and expect. When you look closely at the patterns you repeat in love, you may notice that they resemble old emotional imprints rather than conscious intentions. This is the paradox that so many people live with, wanting connection while being quietly guided by memories of disconnection, wanting to feel worthy while carrying a vibration shaped by wounds that were never acknowledged, wanting to manifest a life aligned with the heart while unconsciously reliving the emotional atmosphere of the past. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains that the body becomes a living record of the past, memorizing emotional states until they turn into automatic responses. What once was pain becomes identity. What once was survival becomes personality. If a person grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent, unpredictable, or conditional, the nervous system adapts to that pattern, and later in life, it recreates familiar dynamics because the familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. This is why the mind may consciously crave a healthy relationship, while the body gravitates toward the emotional frequency of abandonment, chaos, or emotional distance, not because it is logical, but because it is known. These invisible beliefs often begin subtly. A child who reaches out emotionally and doesn't feel met begins to form the impression that love must be earned or negotiated. Another might internalize that affection is unpredictable, available only when they behave perfectly, or silence their true needs. Over time, these impressions evolve into core beliefs. I am too much. I am not enough. I need to prove my worth. Love requires sacrifice. Connection is unsafe. The adult does not remember forming these beliefs. They simply feel like the truth of who they are. And because the subconscious works like a lens, every experience is filtered through these invisible conclusions. Without realizing it, many people manifest relationships that validate their oldest emotional narratives. If the belief is that love eventually abandons, partners who are inconsistent feel strangely magnetic. If the belief is that emotions cause overwhelm or conflict, partners who avoid vulnerability feel comforting. The body recognizes the emotional signature of the old story and interprets it as home, even when consciousness begs for something different. This is why self-awareness alone rarely breaks these patterns. The subconscious is fluent in repetition, in familiar emotional chemistry, in the neurobiological loops that recreate the past. And unless the emotional memory is rewired, the same story continues to unfold with different faces. What makes these beliefs so powerful is that they rarely speak in words. They speak through sensations, impulses, and emotional reflexes. They speak through the tightening of the chest when receiving affection, through the sudden urge to pull away when someone shows genuine interest, through the overwhelming need to fix, please, or shrink in order to feel accepted, through the fear that if you are truly seen, you will be rejected. These micro-responses form an emotional map that the subconscious follows with precision, guiding the person toward situations that maintain the internal equilibrium, even when that equilibrium is built on pain. Modern neuroscience reveals that the emotional brain cannot distinguish between what is familiar and what is safe. Familiarity is processed as comfort. Novelty, even when healthy, is processed as a threat. This explains why stepping into a relationship grounded in respect, calmness, and openness can initially feel uncomfortable or even boring. The nervous system has not yet learned how to interpret peace as safety. To someone who grew up in emotional turbulence, stability feels foreign, and the subconscious rejects it until the emotional patterns are retrained. When people talk about wanting to manifest love or a higher life experience, they often overlook this fundamental truth. You cannot attract what your body has not yet learned to receive. Manifestation is not about wishing or visualizing alone. It is about aligning your emotional frequency with the reality you desire. If the body is still wired for fear, lack, or rejection, it cannot sustain the vibration of healthy love, because that vibration contradicts the internal memory. And when the internal memory contradicts the vision, the internal memory always wins. The process of healing these beliefs begins with acknowledging that they exist. Many carry shame around their emotional patterns, believing that they should be stronger, wiser, or less affected by the past. But these patterns were formed as acts of survival. They were the psyche's way of creating meaning when the world felt unpredictable. Healing begins when you understand that you were not broken. You were adapting. You were interpreting the world with the tools you had, in the environments you received. In this journey, it is not enough to identify the belief intellectually. The emotional charge underneath it must be dissolved, because the subconscious is moved by feeling, not logic. This is why Dr. Dispenza emphasizes the importance of creating new emotional states before the new reality appears. You must teach the body what it feels like to be worthy, to be chosen, to be calm in connection, to trust in reciprocity. This internal shift becomes the vibrational signature that the universe responds to. The external world mirrors the internal transformation. Healing invisible beliefs is not about erasing the past, but about rewriting the meaning it holds. It is about teaching the nervous system that safety is possible, teaching the heart that it can open without collapsing, and teaching the mind that the old story was never the ultimate truth. As these layers begin to shift, the emotional magnet of your life changes. You stop gravitating toward relationships that mirror your wounds and begin drawing in people and experiences that resonate with your healed self. When the invisible architecture of belief changes, destiny changes with it. And love, instead of being a battlefield, becomes a reflection of the inner peace you have cultivated. The silent weight of control and the energetic barrier of emotional scarcity. There are moments in life when the yearning for love becomes so strong that it begins to feel like a force pulling the heart in all directions, searching for certainty, reassurance, or any hint of safety. Yet beneath this longing often lives an unspoken tension, a subtle need to predict outcomes, to prevent disappointment, to secure something that feels too fragile to be trusted. This silent grip, though formed from fear, becomes one of the greatest barriers to manifesting the relationships and life experiences that align with our essence. It is not an act of desperation, but a protective reflex built over years of emotional unpredictability. And the paradox is that the very instinct meant to shield us ends up blocking what we desire most. When someone grows up in environments where love felt inconsistent, where emotions were met with indifference or volatility, the nervous system learns to mistake vigilance for safety. The mind begins scanning for threats that are not present, replaying old memories as if they could prevent future harm. Dr. Joe Dispenza often explains that the brain, conditioned by past emotional patterns, continuously anticipates the familiar. When those patterns are rooted in fear, the body becomes addicted to anticipating loss, disappointment, or betrayal. Even when the conscious mind insists that love is possible, the subconscious remains alert, ready to shield the heart from any perceived instability. This internal conflict creates an energetic contradiction. A person may visualize a healthy relationship, speak affirmations of worthiness, and hope for emotional abundance, yet simultaneously carry a frequency shaped by vigilance and lack. The universe does not respond to words alone. It responds to the emotional field beneath the words. When fear of disappointment carries more intensity than faith in connection, the emotional field becomes clouded by scarcity, signaling to the outer world that the person is not yet prepared to receive what they claim to desire. This is not a moral failure, but a neurological one, where the imprint of past experiences becomes stronger than the vision of the future. There is a tendency to believe that wanting something intensely will bring it closer. But intensity rooted in fear does not attract. It constricts. It narrows perception, tightens the emotional field, and reinforces the belief that love is fragile. When someone tries to manifest from this space, the energy becomes clouded by attempts to control timing, outcomes, or the behavior of others. The mind begins to fixate on signs, searching obsessively for confirmation that desire is being met. Ironically, this over-attachment disrupts the coherence necessary for manifestation. Instead of radiating openness, the person radiates urgency. Instead of embodying trust, they embody tension. Instead of aligning with abundance, they align with the fear of losing it. The emotional body interprets this urgency as evidence of threat, activating physiological responses that make the person less receptive to connection. Elevated cortisol narrows the emotional bandwidth, reducing the ability to experience compassion, presence, or curiosity. Even in moments of genuine affection, the nervous system may remain guarded, waiting for the moment that confirms its protective worldview. As a result, relationships become filtered through suspicion or hyper-awareness, not because the partner is untrustworthy, but because the internal template of love has not yet been rewired to recognize safety. It is crucial to understand that the pattern of control is not a conscious choice. It is a survival response that originates from emotional scarcity. When the heart has learned that connection is unpredictable, it attempts to manage outcomes to avoid repeating old wounds. This creates a paradoxical situation where the desire for intimacy coexists with a fear of surrender. The person seeks closeness, but remains emotionally guarded. They long for certainty, but resist vulnerability. They want to let go, but tighten their grip when fear arises. This tension prevents the emotional field from opening fully to the energetic resonance of healthy love. In many cases, this pattern becomes so familiar that the individual begins to believe they must perform emotionally to be chosen. They try harder, give more, prove themselves, or suppress their needs to maintain harmony. This performance, though well-intentioned, reinforces the subconscious belief that love must be earned, not received freely. The energetic message becomes one of inadequacy rather than authenticity. And because the subconscious attracts experiences that confirm its core beliefs, the person often draws in partners who reflect their internal narrative, perpetuating cycles of imbalance or emotional deprivation. The shift out of this pattern requires a profound reorientation of the emotional field, not through willpower, but through awareness. When the need to control is understood as a symptom of past emotional scarcity rather than a flaw, compassion begins to soften the tension. Dr. Dispenza's teachings highlight that the body must learn to feel safe without relying on external conditions. Safety becomes an internal experience, cultivated through presence rather than prediction. As the nervous system relaxes, the emotional frequency naturally rises, creating coherence between desire and vibration. This is where transformation begins. When the body no longer anticipates loss, the heart opens. When the mind no longer scans for danger, the soul expands. When the emotional field no longer contracts under fear, it aligns with the flow of the universe. In that alignment, manifestation becomes a natural unfolding rather than a forced pursuit. The person stops trying to micromanage destiny and instead becomes attuned to the deeper rhythm of life, one that responds not to control, but to authenticity. Over time, the need to prove worthiness dissolves because the internal narrative evolves from "I must earn love" to "I am safe to receive love." The frequency of scarcity gives way to the frequency of openness. The emotional field recalibrates itself, no longer vibrating with the memory of past wounds, but with the possibility of new experiences. And as the inner world shifts, The outer world mirrors this transformation. Relationships become less about survival and more about genuine connection. Manifestation becomes less about longing and more about resonance. When emotional scarcity fades, the universe does not seem distant. It feels present, responsive, and aligned. The person no longer chases signs. They become the sign. They no longer cling to outcomes. They trust their unfolding. And love, which once felt conditional or fragile, reveals itself as an extension of inner coherence rather than a temporary gift from the outside world. Rewriting the unconscious story and returning the heart to its original rhythm, there are chapters of our inner history that we never consciously wrote, yet they shape our present as if they were etched into stone. These are the emotional memories stored not in words, but in sensations, instincts, and reflexes. They belong to the subconscious, a realm that governs far more of our lives than we realize. When someone repeatedly finds themselves in relationships that echo the same pattern, distance, conflict, dismissal, or emotional invisibility, it is rarely because they lack awareness. It is because the subconscious is still loyal to an old emotional script, one created long before they even understood what love meant. To transform this script is not simply to reframe thoughts, but to change the very emotional signature that the body has learned to call home. Dr. Joe Dispenza often explains that the subconscious mind is a record of the past, a library of emotional experiences replayed through automatic responses. If the past was shaped by instability, neglect, or emotional unpredictability, the body adapts to navigate that environment. Later in adulthood, even in moments of genuine connection, the nervous system may respond with caution, withdrawal, or subtle distrust. These reactions are not conscious decisions. They are echoes of memories encoded as survival strategies. Healing requires us to step into the territory where these memories live, not to relive them, but to reinterpret them through a new lens. Carl Jung's insight resonates deeply here. Whatever remains unconscious will continue to appear in our lives, disguised as fate. Many people believe destiny is punishing them, or that they are unlucky in love, when in truth they are living inside emotional templates built decades earlier. The child who learned to quiet their needs to avoid conflict becomes the adult who attracts partners unable to meet those needs. The child who learned that affection arrives only after perfection becomes the adult who overextends themselves in relationships. The child who absorbed the belief that emotions lead to abandonment becomes the adult who fears intimacy, even while craving it. These patterns are not evidence of inadequacy. They are evidence of unhealed emotional memory. To step out of these patterns, we must understand the language of the subconscious. It does not respond to reasoning or intellectual insight alone. It responds to repetition, emotion, imagery, and embodied states. When someone tries to transform their life solely through positive thinking, they often feel frustrated because the body has not yet been taught a new emotional baseline. They are trying to plant seeds in soil that has not been tended. The subconscious cannot accept a new belief if the emotional environment contradicts it. This is why someone may say they are worthy of love while secretly feeling undeserving when affection is offered. The subconscious believes the feeling, not the words. Rewriting these patterns begins with acknowledging the emotional charge stored in the body. For many, this charge is rooted in old memories that were never fully processed because the person did not have the language, safety, or support to understand them at the time. These memories linger as fragments: tightness in the chest, a sudden wave of anxiety, the urge to withdraw, the instinct to please, or the fear of being truly seen. When these sensations arise, they are not signs of failure. They are signals that an emotional layer is surfacing, requesting integration. Transforming them requires patience, presence, and compassion for the younger self, who had to navigate emotional terrain without a map. Dr. Dispenza teaches that healing begins when we learn to create new emotional states, independent of past conditions. The body must be taught what safety feels like, what calm feels like, what openness feels like, not conceptually but viscerally. As the nervous system begins to relax into unfamiliar states of emotional coherence, the old story loses its grip. The subconscious starts recognizing that the patterns it once believed were necessary for survival are no longer needed. A new inner environment emerges, one where the heart does not brace for impact but softens into trust. This transformation does not happen abruptly. It unfolds in layers, like the slow unraveling of a tightly woven thread. At first, the new emotional frequency may feel fragile or unstable. The mind may question the process, searching for evidence that change is occurring. But healing happens beneath perception, in the subtle shifts of emotional responsiveness. One day, a situation that once triggered panic now feels manageable. Another day, a moment of affection feels safe instead of overwhelming. These small signs mark profound neurological rewiring. The subconscious is learning a new language. As the emotional field shifts, something remarkable begins to happen. The external world responds differently. The person starts gravitating toward relationships that reflect their growing sense of worthiness. They begin choosing partners who match their healed state rather than their wounded one. Instead of chasing affection, they find themselves drawn to authenticity. Instead of performing for love, they express themselves naturally. Instead of fearing abandonment, they trust their ability to navigate connection. The magnetism of their life changes not because the universe altered, but because they did. There is a moment in every healing journey when the old story no longer feels like home. The familiar becomes uncomfortable, and the new begins to feel possible. This is a pivotal point, a quiet shift in identity, where the person realizes that the beliefs that once defined them are dissolving. They are no longer the child trying to survive emotional turbulence. They are an adult capable of shaping their inner world with intention and compassion. This realization marks the true rewriting of the subconscious story. From this new place, manifestation becomes less of a struggle and more of a natural flow. When the emotional signature aligns with clarity, openness, and self-worth, the universe responds with experiences that mirror that alignment. Love arrives not as a test, but as a reflection. Relationships become co-creations instead of reenactments, and the heart, finally liberated from the weight of old memories, begins to beat in rhythm with its true essence. Aligning the inner field. With the universal rhythm of essential love, there comes a point in every inner journey when the search for love, clarity, or direction begins to shift from an outward pursuit to an inward resonance. It is in this transition that the understanding of alignment becomes essential, not as a spiritual cliché, but as a profound reorientation of the emotional, neurological, and energetic layers that shape the way a person moves through the world. When someone has spent years navigating life through the lens of fear, scarcity, or emotional fragmentation, the idea of aligning with the universe may initially feel abstract, but alignment is not an external phenomenon. It is the natural result of restoring coherence within the self, allowing the heart, mind, and nervous system to operate as a unified field rather than a fragmented one. Gregg Braden often speaks about the relationship between human emotion and the electromagnetic field of the heart, describing how coherent emotional states generate waves that interact with the universe in meaningful ways. This concept is not metaphorical. When the emotional field becomes harmonious, it creates a signal that the universe reflects back through experiences, relationships, and opportunities that match its frequency. But when the emotional field is shaped by unresolved tension or internal conflict, the universe echoes that disharmony through patterns that feel repetitive or misaligned. Alignment, therefore, is less about effort and more about resonance. It is not the act of demanding from the universe, but the art of becoming a clear receiver. One of the barriers to this resonance is the misinterpretation of love as something fragile, conditional, or dependent on external validation. Many people enter relationships seeking to fill an emotional void or to rewrite a painful chapter of their history through someone else's affection. In doing so, they place the responsibility of healing onto another person who cannot possibly resolve what has been carried for years. This creates a cycle in which love becomes entangled with longing, fear, or performance, disrupting the energetic clarity necessary for genuine connection. When the heart operates from a place of need rather than wholeness, its electromagnetic field becomes inconsistent, oscillating between hope and fear, desire and doubt, longing and resistance. These oscillations send mixed signals to the universe, making it difficult for aligned relationships or experiences to manifest. Alignment begins to take shape when the person stops approaching love as a remedy for their wounds and starts approaching it as an expression of their essence. This requires a shift from seeking to embodying, from looking outward to listening inward, from trying to control outcomes to cultivating states of being that allow the right outcomes to emerge naturally. When someone begins to feel safe within themselves, safe to express, safe to receive, safe to be seen, there is a quiet reorganization within the emotional field. The heart no longer contracts under the weight of old fears. The mind no longer anticipates rejection. The nervous system no longer reacts as if every moment of intimacy is a potential threat. Instead, the person begins to resonate with the frequency of connection, compassion, and emotional openness. This inner coherence does not erase challenges, nor does it eliminate moments of vulnerability. What it does is transform the way those moments are experienced. Rather than interpreting emotional discomfort as a warning sign, the person begins to see it as part of the expansion process. Rather than withdrawing into old patterns, they remain present long enough to understand the message hidden within the discomfort. This presence becomes a signal in itself, communicating to the universe that the individual is no longer operating from fear, but from awareness. Awareness is a form of energetic maturity, and it creates the conditions for new experiences to enter. One of the subtle signs that alignment is beginning to occur is the shift in what feels familiar. Old patterns that once felt magnetic begin to lose their appeal. Relationships that once ignited anxiety no longer feel compelling. The emotional chemistry that once accompanied chaos or inconsistency begins to dissolve. Instead, the person finds themselves drawn to calmness, honesty, and emotional reciprocity. This shift may feel strange at first because the nervous system is adjusting to a new definition of safety, one based not on survival, but on authenticity. Yet this is precisely the moment when alignment solidifies. The emotional field no longer vibrates with the residues of the past, allowing the universe to respond to the person's current vibration rather than their historical one. As the alignment deepens, the perception of time also begins to shift. The person stops rushing their process or pressuring themselves to achieve outcomes within specific timelines. They begin to understand, often intuitively, that their inner state influences the outer world more than any external action could. This awareness brings a sense of calm to the manifestation process. Instead of forcing or chasing, they begin to participate in the flow of life with presence and clarity. The universe in turn responds not to urgency, but to coherence. Opportunities arise in moments that feel orchestrated. Relationships appear that feel familiar in a way that has nothing to do with the past and everything to do with resonance. In this space, love is no longer a quest, but a reflection. It becomes the natural expression of a healed inner landscape. The person does not attract love by searching for it, but by becoming a frequency that invites it. They do not manifest a relationship through performance, but through authenticity. They do not depend on another to create emotional stability because the foundation of stability already exists within them. The heart, once fragmented by old stories, becomes whole enough to participate in connection without losing itself. When alignment with the universe is achieved through emotional coherence, love does not arrive as a dramatic revelation. It appears quietly, steadily, with a sense of inevitability. It feels less like a miracle and more like the natural consequence of becoming who you truly are. And in that becoming, the universe recognizes its own reflection. There is a moment in every transformative journey when the noise of old patterns begins to fade, and what remains is a quiet, steady awareness that the power to shape one's life has always lived within. Throughout this exploration of hidden beliefs, emotional memory, and the vibrational architecture of love, one truth becomes unmistakable. Healing is not a destination, but a continuous unfolding. The person you were when pain shaped your choices is not the person you become when awareness illuminates new possibilities. And as the subconscious narrative rewrites itself, the world responds with a clarity that once felt unreachable. Dr. Joe Dispenza often emphasizes that lasting change occurs when the inner state no longer depends on external conditions. When the heart learns to rest in coherence, the universe becomes a mirror of that steadiness. When the mind releases its allegiance to outdated memories, a different rhythm begins to pulse through your emotional field, one that aligns naturally with the experiences you desire. This alignment is not about perfection. It is about presence. It is about returning to the body, the breath, the inner landscape, where intuition speaks quietly but unmistakably. Gregg Braden's teachings remind us that the heart's electromagnetic field extends far beyond the physical body, interacting continuously with the environment and the people we encounter. As your inner coherence strengthens, this field becomes an invitation, subtle yet profound, calling in relationships, opportunities, and synchronicities that resonate with your true essence. Love, in this light, is not an external reward. It is the expression of your healed self, meeting the world with openness instead of fear. When you begin to embody this coherence, the universe responds in kind. Patterns dissolve, cycles end. What once felt unattainable becomes natural. You no longer search for love from a place of scarcity. You invite it from a place of wholeness. And in that invitation, life reorganizes itself around your new vibration. This is the turning point, the moment when the path forward becomes not only visible but inevitable. A life aligned with your essence does not need to be chased. It emerges, quietly and powerfully, from the person you have become. Before you step into whatever comes next, pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you willing to release the version of you that survived, so you can finally become the version of you that loves, receives, and manifests without fear? If this journey resonates with your heart, subscribe to the channel so you never walk this path alone. Your transformation deserves support, clarity, and a space where your evolution is honored. And now, continue watching the next video on your screen. Your next step into alignment, manifestation, and emotional freedom begins right there.